All right. Hi, guys. All right. You guys finally get to hear my lovely voice. So, welcome to the end of Module 1, and congrats on completing it and our coverage of deontological ethics, or also known as Kantian theory. I was impressed with everyone's post this week. Everyone was respectful, challenging, and very engaging, and facilitated a lot of great discussion. So, let's start off with one of my main goals of this course is to help everyone see things from a different perspective. And most of you really did a good job with some self reflecting and thinking about your personal ethics. Most of you talked about your ethical foundations. Was it a teacher, a mentor, a leader, parent? Maybe it was the military or some type of training. Maybe it was faith. Maybe it was the Boy Scouts or some other youth organization you belong to. So those are going to be your beginning or your foundation. From there, we are going to talk about theories that resonate best with you. But first, let's talk about the scenario and whether it was ethical or not for Maria to copy software for John. Um, those of you who subscribed more towards feminist theory would say it is okay to do that. Because a feminist focuses on your sphere of influence. And we don't cover this in class, so I want to cover it briefly here for those of you who kind of went in that direction. Those of you who have subscribed to more of a feminist theory would say it's ethical for Maria to help John because it is Maria's duty to help John as a friend, where she really has no duty to help anyone outside of her sphere of influence. So that's why she just was solely worried about her friend John. But as you saw this week in Kantian theory, we all have a duty to uphold universal maxims or the categorical imperative, where if we do this for one person, we have to be able to do this for all people, which is what some of you had a hard time with. For me, I particularly like this theory, and some of you probably caught on to that, because it allows us to understand what's right or wrong without knowing the consequences. Because generally, when we decide on something, we don't know what the consequences are going to be. That's why I love Kantian ethics, because I can still have an answer as to whether it's right or wrong. And the other part of this theory is whether we treated everyone as ends in themselves or as a means to an end. So under Kantian ethics, you see that Maria was treating the software company as a means to her end in order to help her friend John. And some of you brought up whether we have a financial duty to help a friend. And this goes back to what we're talking about on the discussion board. If we have a friend that can't afford to eat, then sure, spend the money and feed them. But John is a working man, he's an adult, he's not impoverished, he's just made some really poor financial decisions. So if we're going to follow Kantian ethics, what is your duty to John? What's your duty to the software company? We can form various maxims that we can use. One can be always help others. If that were the case, then that would be ethical. But once we get to the next step that asks if anyone was treated as means to an end, then we determined that it's not ethical under Kantian theory. If we use a maxim that says to always help others, then we can look at other ways to follow that maxim. We can help them in other ways. We don't have to break the law, which is, a societal maxim we have, which is to always obey the law. We don't have to break the law. We can purchase a software for him. We can help him by looking at ours to see if he likes it, see how it works, and help him set up his own plan to save money in order to help him afford that program. To me, I think that's the extent of your obligation to your friend. I don't think you have a duty to put yourself out a lot of money to help a friend, or at least a reasonable amount of money to help a friend, when you can help him the same way by showing him what you learned from the program or helping him come up with a plan to be able to afford it on his own. One of you even suggested it could set a precedent and everyone should then be allowed to just pirate the software. It's also, a decent point. So as you can see, there are several ways we can go about this without breaking the maxims we set for ourselves in Kantian ethics. So going back to your journals, some of you resonated well with Kantian theory. You liked that it was strict guidelines and keeps people on track and allows you to make choices without knowing the consequences. And you still know you had the right intentions. You did things correctly and you didn't use people as a means to an end. Others didn't like the rigidity of Kantian theory as it talks about in the Birch book, especially when there are conflicting maxims. It can be very difficult to follow. However, I think overall, if we look at this as an approach to use, particularly in the intelligence community, that we have a duty to serve. So if you look at it from the perspective of having a duty to serve, there's room for Kantian ethics. Even for people who work in the fields where things are more questionable. For example, if you're an interrogator, you're not treating the person as an end and him or herself, you're using them as a means to an end. For those of us in that field, that's why we can't always stick to one theory. So we can do our best to try to always use Kantian theory and apply it to everything, but there's going to be situations where we have to pull in other theories based on the job that we have to do. But my most important goal for all of you is that you use this course as a means to figuring out what those lines are you are comfortable crossing for the sake of national security, and what lines you are not comfortable crossing. And those will help you drive your personal code of ethics that will enable you to make these decisions in the future. Ideally, if you can make those decisions ahead of time, you can put yourself in a field or position where you won't be forced to do questionable things and that you're not willing to do. Because ultimately it all boils down is can you live with yourself if after you chose this path. So my job in this course is to try and help you be comfortable wherever you decide to go. Anyway, this coming week we'll be discussing the utilitarian approach, and we're going to actually look at the same scenario with Marie and John, except we're going to look at it from a utilitarian perspective. Some of you already kind of read ahead and brought up the utilitarian approach, and some of you seem to like that approach. But the interesting thing about utilitarianism is you'll see that you can get two different answers whether you use utilitarian theory or Kantian theory. You can even get two different outcomes, whether it's ethical or unethical, just using utilitarian theory, depending on your perspective. So I look forward to hearing your answers. If you have any questions at all, feel free to email me on Canvas or reply to one of the announcements. Good luck and see you soon. Bye.